Well, the more I thought about this presentation, the more I went through it, the less I wanted to actually talk about future shock and the effect that it has on our society. The more I wanted to talk about how we can change our motivation and our leadership styles to lead us through some of the dramatic changes that are coming up. Quickly, I'll define future shock. It was coined by author and sociologist Alvin Toffler as when the accelerated rate of technological or social change leaves people disconnected and suffering from a shattering stress and disorientation, largely resulting in a lack of action. Now, I'm going to kind of lead into it with a confession. At one time, I worked for a small software company that had a decent product that tracked heart surgery patients' progress throughout the rest of their lives. I was hired on as a quality engineer to apply my knowledge of software testing and quality assurance to their product. And if you look at my resume, the part that describes my time at this company isn't exactly truthful. As shocking as it sounds, sometimes resumes don't tell the whole story. Now, if you look at the blurb, you'll see words like provided, supported, responsible, implemented, time-intensive environment, high-pressure situations, all put in there with a basis in fact, all of them, but they're put in there to kind of describe the change and the effect I had on this company. The blurb I seemed to have left out before I sent this to other employers was that I failed miserably at this job. Now, I thought I'd come into what I saw as a small, somewhat dysfunctional organization and turn things around. I'd take the knowledge that I had from working with bigger companies and apply it to their product. In doing so, I was seen as an outsider who wanted to push through changes regardless of the effect they had on the current employees or the customers. And I didn't understand why everybody wasn't seeing my brilliance since I was the one with the experience they had wanted and they recruited me heavily. Every change that I made created 10 more situations that I had to deal with. I was constantly barraged with questions about what I was doing and why. Nobody was picking up my ideas and running with them like I thought they should have. And I felt like I was alone in my quest to revamp the way this company worked. It became too much for me. There was too much change. I couldn't deal with the social pressures and the technological changes at the same time. And I froze. Instead of looking to the future and acting with a purpose, I spent my time chasing easy fixes, and I started to complain how the system just doesn't work. Now, looking back, the problem that I feel really affected me here was not what I was doing, but what was motivating me. I was mostly motivated by money and recognition. If I did this job well, I would get paid well, and everybody would sing my praises. I couldn't become motivated to deal with things like office politics, short-sighted budgeting, people not being on board with my thoughts of how improved quality should be the center of the organization. As the work became harder, I convinced myself that it wasn't worth what they were paying me, and I left as soon as I found a better paying job. Now, what I didn't see was the good that my actions would have had in the future. It would have helped people who were getting heart surgery. What could be more important than that? It was an example of me being motivated by something called contingent motivation. Now, contingent motivation is what most businesses use today to base their compensation on. It's simply, if you do a certain thing, you expect it to get paid a certain amount. If you do this, you will get that. Now, software testing is complex, it's difficult, and it's expensive, but it works very well with contingent motivation. You create a testing plan. If you find things that need to be in that testing plan, you change it and go through it again. If more testing is needed on software, you pay the engineer overtime and he'll do it, or you add more resources to the project to make sure it comes in on time. It doesn't work very well when doing complex situations where new things and new ways of thinking are needed, such as changing the culture in a close-knit company. When the path is not clear and new paradigms are needed, contingent motivation is not the most efficient way. Now, a good example of this is called the candle problem. A psychologist named Carl Dunker in 1952 created this. And what he would do is he would give a subject a book of matches, a box of thumbtacks, and a candle. And the objective was to take the candle, affix it to a wall, so that when it's lit, it neither scorches the wall nor drips wax on the floor. Now, what people would do when they'd start out is take the thumbtacks and kind of smush them into the candle. That wouldn't work. Then they'd take the matches and burn the candle and try to melt the wax so to fix it there. That didn't work. And after about between 5 and 6 minutes, most people would figure out that the key was actually the box that the thumbtacks came in. And about 10 years later, somebody at Princeton named Sam Glucksenberg took this a step further. He took 2 groups of 50 students, Princeton seniors, who can be considered fairly intelligent people. The first group of 50, he said, you go do this. We're going to establish the base times. They weren't offered anything for doing it faster. The second group, he said, whoever comes in the top 25% of the finishers will get $5, and the person who finishes fastest will get $20. Now, in 1963, $5 for a few minutes of your time can be considered pretty good compensation. Now, what happened consistently was that the group that was offered money to finish faster finished an average of 3.5 minutes slower than the group that wasn't offered compensation. Now, as a business student, as an American, as a believer in free markets, this is not how it's supposed to work. You offer somebody money, they're going to be more motivated to do things faster, they're going to create a better outcome, they're going to think of new and ingenious ways it happens. Well, in cases like this, when things are not quite as what they seem and it needs a new way of thinking, motivation can actually stymie creativity and innovative thinking. Now, thinking about this and how it's going to apply to our future, there are many changes that are coming that are going to require a heightened level of thinking in our society. Changes in many areas are going to accelerate. Things like globalization and the lowering of trade barriers is causing an increase in competition from around the world. And the ingenuity of this competition is going to erode profits away from companies here in the U.S. We'll have to continue to do less with more. Do more with less. Fuel prices are going to increase compared to what we earn, and that's going to limit the scope of what we spend our money on. Migration in the U.S. is increasing, and it's leaving us with cities that are problem cities, such as Detroit, Michigan, where I heard on the news the other day that houses are selling for an average of $14,000, and Buffalo, New York, that has been depopulating at a rate of 7% a year for more than the last 10 years. Our economy is currently producing a flow of $30 billion a month out of the U.S. in the form of a trade deficit. Our national debt is going to have the same effect on our government that it does have on families who get into too much debt. It's going to be increasingly difficult for our government to spend money on things that they think are worth it, because they're going to need that money to pay off what they owe. And as a result, we're going to have to rely less on our government to take us through these dramatic changes. So this is a little dour, and does it mean the American dream is dead? I don't think the American dream is dead. I just think the American dream is no longer solely American. It's going to be a lot tougher to achieve the American dream in the U.S. if the dream is for our children and future generations to have more money, bigger houses, and better cars. But there is still good news if you think of the American dream as in terms of being satisfied with one's life as a yardstick. I believe it was comedian Daniel Tosh that said, "Money can't buy you happiness, but it can buy you a jet ski," and I've never seen anybody frown while they're on a jet ski.